Gerald, it's lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Lovely to see you, Maria,
Now, listen,
even if it's virtual.
it's virtual, yes, but we will get together again soon, no doubt.
I hope so. I hope
Yeah,
so. As Vera Lynn once said.
yes, famously. Listen, I've got to start with what everybody will say is the elephant in the room. I've got to
Yeah,
start with it. But 30 years ago, I can't believe it because I made a mistake. I didn't think it was as long as that. I didn't realize how old I am. 30 years ago this year is the anniversary where everything changed for you
yeah.
and where you had a great business and you disrupted it with one sentence. Are you fed up with talking about it, or is it a good thing to have that?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned it straight away and got it out, the elephant in the room. And yes, it's my anniversary. I think it's April the 22nd of be 30 years. Um, and I won't be celebrating. But nevertheless, it sounds a bit perverse. But in a way, I'm glad that it's not forgotten by everybody because, I've made a nice living out of it these days. Where I travel all over Europe, or I did travel it up until this year, talking about it, joking about it, and really, it's very cathartic, really, because when people hear the whole story, they have a certain amount of sympathy. Not that I'm looking for sympathy, but it has helped me in doing my speaking. It helped me in setting up my health club, which was very successful, and my jewellery website. So I have used it. I have turned that massive negative, and it was the biggest negative in corporate history, into somewhat of a positive. So it's still remembered, perhaps by only the over 40s or the over 35s. But I'd rather go out on a wet night in Wigan where people and do a speech where people actually know who I am rather than they don't, and they probably wouldn't know who I was if I wouldn't have made that speech.
That's true. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And in fact, these days it's probably even easier to disrupt your business than it was 30 years ago because, of course, you could say something on social media without thinking and have a similar effect. So it's quite interesting. So yes, you are definitely infamous and famous for that. So obviously your reason for reinvention, and this is sort of the theme of what we really want to be talking about with you today, was obvious. You had no choice. You had to reinvent. But do you think that reinvention should always be about when you come face to face with a crisis or there's a problem, or should we always be reinventing, even in good times?
Well, yeah, before the pandemic, the world had changed in terms of you didn't have a job for life. So you're always seeing whether you can improve your situation. People were not as ambitious in the olden days. They just accepted that the safety and the security of their position. And that is really, in this day and age, the wrong way to go about things. To really improve your status and to improve your wealth, nowadays I think it's imperative that you're always looking to reinvent yourself, to change, because if you don't, you just go backwards. So yeah, I mean, I was sort of doing nothing for a long time after I lost my job. I'm it's all very well me sort of preaching now, but I was sort of in this rut of basically believing what the press was saying about me and that I was unemployable. And I really did nothing for 7 years. So I was self isolating before it was a thing. I basically had given up. So it was only when actually my wife threatened to throw me out that I got off my backside and opened up my health club. So sometimes you need somebody to give you a kick up the arse.
Absolutely. Good for her. Good for Mrs.
Yeah,
Ratner. Well done, you.
absolutely.
But change, change, whether it's thrust upon us or whether we create it ourselves, it's not something that we particularly like. But you sort of advocate embracing change. How can you help me do that? How can I embrace change when I really would rather I didn't have to?
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, nobody likes change. We all like the security of not having to make, to risk everything, because it is a risk. Because to make a change, you have to actually give up what you've got, even though it might not be that wonderful. So it's terrifying to a certain degree. And as I get older now, I'm more, I tend to take less risks. My daughter was working for The Economist, which I thought was the greatest job you can have. And she said, oh, she's going to leave and start in a new company, a startup company. And I thought, oh my God, you're completely nuts. But it was the best thing that she ever did. You know, she's earning much more money. She's got fantastic job satisfaction. She took the view that she was not happy doing what she was doing, and she wasn't prepared to just carry on not being happy, because if you're not happy in a job, you're not really good at it. So you know, you see these recruitment companies nowadays that seem to be, you know, doing so phenomenally well because they're moving people around. And the reason people are moving around so much compared to how they did in the old days is because it works. It works to change, to not spend your whole life doing exactly the same thing, to really, you know, take up a challenge, take the risk. And there's some, you know, business, we're not in the public sector where there's very little risk. Have a wonderful, the police and, you know, nurses. There's not the risk that you have in the private sector. This, you know, you've got to accept that to be successful, you have to take a risk. And that involves often reinventing yourself and moving from one job to the next.
That's really fascinating, actually, because you're absolutely right. I mean, my father stayed in the same job, you know, from when he got it, the job that he wanted, he got it, went up the ranks, and he was there till he retired. And it's interesting. And, you know, some of us have had sort of like portfolio careers they talk about. And I've been in my industry for 23 years, but I have to say I've changed it every year. If it hasn't changed for me, I've made the changes. But when you create the change yourself, it's much better. So you focus a lot on risk, and it's interesting. You are right that you do have to take a risk, but surely in taking a risk, you risk failure, and you know, should we risk failure? Do we embrace failure? Is failure a good thing?
Well, it worked for me. I feel that I am a better person for it. My friends say to me that I'm much nicer, and I said, well, I'd rather not be nice and much richer. But no, I think that people who sail through life without any setback, I often feel there's something missing from them, some sort of empathy, of sympathy. I think to be part of the human race, you must have failed at some time. That's part of life. And you know, a lot of people now during this pandemic that are moaning and complaining and whinging the whole time. And yeah, they're quite justified to do that because, you know, they've lost their businesses and they've lost their livelihoods, and it's horrendous. But they are the sort of people that have not experienced the terrible, you know, setbacks that you have in life. I have done that, and I'm finding that even though I have lost my livelihood, like a lot of other people, I'm handling it. You know, because compared to what I went through, this is nothing, you know, and it's a good thing. It does toughen you up, and it doesn't give me any pleasure to say that, but life is difficult. But if you accept that, it's no longer so difficult.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Really wise words. I think also the fact, as you said, once you've experienced something, you know that you can come out of it, and therefore you have faith that you can take yourself out of it again. So I think that's really
Absolutely.
good. You'd also talk about the importance of setting goals and of planning. So how do you do that when there's so much uncertainty?
Well, you can't set goals, you know, for the future. I mean, this is what the government doesn't seem to realise, that we do need to have some sort of certainty. You know, Glastonbury was cancelled, even though it's a long way off, because what perhaps people in government don't realise, it takes, as you would know, setting up events, it takes months and months of planning, and you have to have some sort of idea, even if it's September or something like that. So it's difficult. All you can do is to basically work at one quarter at a time. You know, if you've got a business, divide it up into 5 sections, give them all, you know, what they've got to do in the next quarter, and then they can build on that to the next quarter, one step at a time. It's just stepping stones. There's no, you do have to plan in business. It's absolutely crucial, but you can't plan for 6 months or 9 months ahead. You've just got to look at the situation as it is today, and plan for the next 3 months and build on that.
I think that's really great advice, and that's really good because that's what I'm doing at the moment. So thank you for that. I'm doing the right thing without even asking you. So that's wonderful, brilliant. That's great. How I mean, we talk about the struggles of the pandemic. We're certainly global recession, but some big household names have invented themselves at time of recession. Have you had experience of creating a business in recession? Have you got any advice to share on doing that?
Well, people assume that because there's a recession that you can't start a business, just like they assume that during a boom that you can start a business. Really, starting a business has got nothing to do with whether it's a boom or a recession. Starting a business is whether it's a good business to start or not, and you can succeed. Perhaps, yes, you've got slightly less chance of being successful if there's a recession than a boom. But there's plenty of people that are not successful during a boom, and there's plenty of people that are very successful during a recession. I think I made my point on that. But as you know, many fortunes, perhaps most great companies have been started in dire times because it's your only opportunity to really acquire fantastic assets that never become available during boom times. Nobody wants to let go of anything. Nothing becomes available. They don't have to. But during the times that we've got now and the future, because we're going to be in this recession, that's one thing that is certain. There'll be great opportunities. I mean, look at Boohoo, Debenhams and Topshop, those brands becoming available. I mean, those companies that have acquired it are going to look back over the next 10 years and think, really, I picked this up for a song. It's just fantastic, which I never would have done at any other time. So on a smaller scale, those are the opportunities. And I always think it's better to acquire an up and running business like Topshop because it has the goodwill. It's very difficult to actually open up a shop from scratch because you've got to build the shop front, you've got to amortize that over the years, you've got all the costs are much greater in opening organically than actually acquiring somebody else's hard work that they've been putting in and the goodwill and the following they've had from customers. I always prefer acquisitions rather than organic growth.
That's really interesting, and that's again, a really great insight. And I think also, as you say, it's a great time to reinvent now when perhaps things aren't, when your business may not be booming and you might be thinking about a different business idea, to be able to park something that is successful. It's easier now and start something else. I mean, no, that's great. Love that. Selling is so important though, isn't it? Whether you're in recession, whether you're in boom, but the selling piece is so important. And selling is a dirty word in business for so many people, and I just don't get it. And I mean, at the end of the day, you are a salesperson before you are anything else, aren't you?
That's all we're doing. That's all we're doing all the time. And it's the most important thing. And before the speech, we did become the world's largest jeweler. It's worth remembering that. And we did it on the basis of selling, hard selling. And when people phone me up, and try and sell something, a lot of people's reaction is, oh God, put the phone down, don't, you're driving me mad, this bloody salesman phone. I never do that. I talk to them. I admire them for selling. And, the best thing that I did was start working in the shop when I was 16, rather than going to university, and working behind the counter and selling to customers. And, when I took over my business, we really went for the hard sell. I mean, in those days, the jewelry shops, the staff were not even incentivized on commission or anything like that. I mean, that was just something that was so important that we did, is we told our staff the importance of selling and rewarded them for doing so, because this is what it's all about in everything we do. I mean, I'm selling now, you're selling now. That's what we're doing, and there's no point in being shy about it. It is the most important part of our lives.
And I think if you know how to sell and learn how to sell and do it really well, you will never ever be out of work, and you'll never be poor.
Exactly. And exactly. And there is a great subtlety in it. There's certain retailers that have got that absolutely right. And the reason that these stores, the high street has failed and the internet's taken, it's not only because of Amazon or the pandemic or the fact that, everyone's got phones. It's actually because the shops have not given a service. They have not informed the public. When you go into a store and you want to buy a laptop or something, for the last 5 or 10 years, you haven't really been sold that laptop. You haven't been, what's selling the laptop is telling the person about that information without being too technical, by telling them simply about the bullet points of why they should buy it and the benefits. Now you get that online because you see all that in reviews and you see all that very succinctly. But we haven't, in the high street, we have not offered that. We have not offered that service to the public. We have not trained our staff to teach them to tell the customer what's on offer clearly enough.
Yeah, you're so right. I started in retail, by the way, when I started in my world. Yeah. So,
Right.
and
So
I think retail is
your
is
blood.
it's in
Yeah.
my blood, but it's actually the best place to learn all of these things, to really learn how to, I think learning to manage a shop and run a shop is one of the best business lessons, because you having to understand every part of the business process, and as you said, the selling bit. And yeah, you could wander into a shop before the pandemic. Now you can't go in, but you wander in and nobody would even acknowledge you or talk to you or try to help you in any way. It's incredible. It has changed such a great deal. You're passionate about selling. I'm passionate about selling. We're both passionate about business. You're also really passionate about learning and continual learning. How important is that for businesses and also for individuals? Whose responsibility is it? Is it the business owner? Is it the individual? Is it a bit of both?
Well, I think that it's your job, if you're running a business, to make sure that everybody in the business is clear about what your goal is. Everybody, whoever was the van driver delivering stuff, everybody who works for that company should know exactly what that company is about, what target. I mean, we made it very clear to all our staff that we are aggressively selling jewellery at a low price, and we want to beat the competition. However we had to do it, we had to do it, and everyone was clear about that. It might sound a very simple message, but you'll be amazed how many companies employ people that haven't got a clue of what that company is about. And it's very sad for them as well as you, because they're going to, I was in a shop in Doncaster at Christmas, they had a Christmas staff, and he kept losing sales, young boy. And sadly, he was not even aware that he had to sell anything. Nobody even told him that. He was just put in the shop. So don't take even the basics for granted with your stuff. It is our responsibility to make it absolutely clear to everybody what is required of them, and then to let them get on with it, and don't undermine them the whole time by continually interfering. If it doesn't work out, fire them, but give them their opportunity. Try and delegate as much as possible.
Super. And coming back to sort of the leaders, the people running the business, I mean, that can be a very lonely job. You run businesses, it's a very lonely job. How important is it to have a really good support system? And how do you go about creating that support system?
Well, I think it's important that you hire people don't be afraid of hiring people that are better than you. Don't worry about, some people are sort of paranoid about the competition. You're not going to be good at everything. If you're a good centre forward, you're not going to be a good goalie. I mean, it's just, I was never good at buying. My particular field was marketing. I was not a great accountant. So that's probably why we got into so much debt. But it's vital that you employ the right people and let them get on with it. Don't also put yourself in an ivory tower, cutting yourself off from your staff. It's very, very important to understand what is going on in the company. I mean, I used to use this method of skip management rather than talking to my colleagues all the time on the board, which a lot of people do spend their time doing. I would skip down to the people at the sharp end of the business, the managers. I was always traveling every Friday around the country, listening to customers, listening to staff, and hearing what their views were and what our problems were, how we can solve them, and ideas, rather than just, talking to the same people all the time. Put yourself about, I suppose.
Yeah, get about a bit. Yeah, I heard
Yeah.
that about you, Gerald. Listen, I could talk to you all day, but we've come to the end, so I'm going to finally ask you a question, and I'm curious to know what you're going to say to this. Have you got any plans to disrupt yourself again?
Well, because I haven't been doing all my speeches, I written a book this year, as you kindly mentioned, Reinvent Yourself, which I've enjoyed. I don't have any fear of starting up again. As you say, when I lost my job at Ratner's, I had no choice, and I started up a health club. And it gave me a huge amount of pleasure actually starting up a business from scratch. There's something special about building from nothing. You've got all these really, these CEOs who take their watch and they take over from somebody else, or however big the company they're running it. They didn't start it. It's a special relationship that you will always have with that company that you created. It's your baby. It's not somebody else that you took over and then you're going to leave for 7 years and go on for something else. And when I started my health club, I actually built something, and I've really got a huge amount of pleasure out of that. So I have no fear if I have to reinvent myself once again, start a new business. I don't know what it is, but I will look forward to doing it because I love building things from scratch.
Fantastic. That sounds brilliant. Gerald, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Maria. Always a pleasure to see you and talk to you. Thank you.